In 2006, you went through, well, horrendous trauma. You were involved in a really serious accident.
I heard the girl that was sitting beside me crying for help, and somebody helped me, so I unhooked her, and we started to find our way out of the wreckage.
I've never heard anything like that before in my life.
I remember calling my mom to say, Mom, I have to tell you something, that plane that crashed, I was on the plane. And she was like, she gave the phone to my brother, I don't know what your sister is saying.
Was there a time where you felt like you could put those why questions to bed, or did they ever come back?
I'm not going to pretend like I have answers, because I do not.
Welcome to the Magnify Conversations. My name's Ruth, and I'm the founder and CEO of Magnify.
And my name's Rachel, and I'm one of the hosts of this show.
Magnify is a global community and content platform focused on equipping women like you to grow in and impact your sphere of influence. We truly want to see you thrive in all areas of life and want to display what faith can look like at the center of that too.
We started the conversations because we wanted to have real discussions about the things that matter. Money, relationships, and work, all through the lens of faith and our relationship with God.
Ultimately, we know as multifaceted women, things are rarely one size fits all. So we speak with many different women who are from our community and hear their stories. We hope you enjoy this episode of the Magnify Conversations.
We're so thankful to be joined in the Magnify Studio this week with Esther to talk about working through, reflecting on, and growing from traumatic and near-death experiences.
Dr. Esther Longe is a speaker, author, marketing strategist, leader, and founder of God in Real Life Outreach, the Alternative Business School, and the 7,000 Movement.
We're so grateful to have spent this time with a powerhouse woman who spoke about the reality of experiencing survivor's guilt and where we need to draw the line with reliving trauma and growing from it.
So let's get into this conversation. Esther, we're so glad that you're joining us for this Magnify conversation today. And we're going to be hearing all about your story, which you will share with us really soon, and just how your faith has grown and developed through what really was a very traumatic experience. But before we get into your story, I want to start with a couple of icebreakers, if that's okay. Sinead, you can join in as well. So if you could have come up with one famous or notable marketing campaign, what would you choose and why?
I already know what I'm going to say. The Stanley Cup. You know, the massive drinking cup. Mm-hmm. They're huge, they're heavy, but everybody I have one. So I wish I was the person that came up with that. Yeah, I'd be doing so well now.
Do you own one?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely.
Amazing. I think I'll go old school. You know the Coca-Cola Christmas campaign?
Yes!
Yeah, that was such a tearjerker. And it's so iconic even till now.
So
it's
iconic.
Literally iconic.
That's a very good one.
I think I know what mine is. So Diet Coke. There was an advert in the 90s. The theme tune was Etta James. It was a builder outside drinking his Diet Coke. But it just became, it truly was iconic of its time. Right. I mean, I still remember it now. So I think for me, that would have been the marketing campaign. And then just switching gears a little bit, if you had to pick one Bible story that you could time travel to and witness, what would it be and why?
I have one in my mind, but is it too cliche? Is David and Goliath too cliche?
No.
I think so, because I think I would have gone up to Goliath like, hey, big boy.
Have you just written yourself into the story?
100%. Yeah, I think I would have wanted to see how big he was physically. Yeah, and I love David, so then I can meet a few people on the way. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely David and Goliath.
That's a very good one.
Yeah.
Esther, how about you?
I think it would be Elijah calling down fire.
Yeah.
So the 800 prophets of Baal and Ashtaroth, that was an iconic moment. That was a mic drop moment.
Yeah.
There's too many choices, right? But I've just had a second to think about it. There's one of two for me. So there is a case in the Old Testament, I think it's in 1 Kings, but I don't know for definite, where a donkey talks to a man because he doesn't listen to God.
Yeah.
Okay.
So then God tells the donkey to talk and he does, and I'm like, I would literally just, what was the accent like? What did it sound like? Right? I just want to know, what's it like when a donkey talks? Like, is it Shrek? No. And then the other one is when the sun stands still in Joshua. I just think, what would that actually be like for time to essentially stand still?
It's more the Old Testament ones, I think, that are more...
They're more exciting.
Yeah, very exciting, yeah.
Good. Well, like I said, Esther, it's so good to have you here. And we'd love to just kind of get into your story a little bit. But first of all, just tell us a bit about your upbringing, your formative years, just, I guess, so we can understand about you a little bit more.
Amazing, thank you. It's lovely to meet you guys. So I was born in Nigeria, born and raised. And I grew up in a single parent home. So my mom loved Jesus. You know, she gave her life to Christ at age 14. And, you know, she would tell us, I don't have anybody else but Jesus. So we used to wonder what we had done, because every waking moment, it felt like we're in church or we're praying or, you know. So, you know, on Sundays especially, we would have prayer in the morning, and then we'll go to church, we'll come back, we would have fellowship in the evening, then we'll have prayer in the evening. And I was just like, come on, you know. But I grew up in church. I gave my life to Christ at age 5. But once I became a teenager, I started to have all these why questions for God. God, if you're so good, then why are my father and mother not together? You know, why are all these things happening? You know, why isn't life as smooth as it's supposed to be, being a Christian? And so I had my little era of rebellion. And I remember, I think I was in university at the time, in year 3, probably. It was the year 2003, and I borrowed the car, you know, to go for a party in the night. And I'd done it before, you know, successfully, I must add, you know. So obviously, you know, I had courage to do it again. And so I remember driving down, there's this long bridge, you know, between the mainland and the island in Lagos. And I was driving down, excited to meet my friends in the party. And, you know, I thought it was my friends calling me. So I picked up the phone. I just heard, Esther, where are you? Oh, my Jesus. It's how many years later, but I can still feel that. Yes.
Remember.
I was like, I just started stammering. I said, I'll be home now. And I told God, it's a long bridge. I don't know, think about maybe the Severn Bridge, for example, you know. And I told God, if either I die on this bridge or I get home safely. And I remember speeding home and getting home in like 7 minutes, which is like a 40-minute journey, and doing it in 7 minutes. Yeah, literally. I was ready to die that night, you know. And I remember going upstairs and my mom said, Esther, why won't you just, you know, surrender your life to Christ? And I remember telling her, if you're so good, I mean, if God is so good, then why are you and my dad not together? You know, why is life the way that it is? And I remember her, hopefully the first and last time that I made her cry, but I remember her crying and saying, you know, she doesn't understand everything, but she's glad that she has my brother, you know, and I from the union with my dad. And I think it was more from seeing her cry, you know, that I took myself to the chapel the next day on campus, because we lived on a university campus, you know, at the time. And I, you know, threw out my Cisco, Drew Hill CD, tapes. It was tapes in those days. And I got my Don McClurking and Kirk Franklin, you know, and, you know, I rededicated my life to Christ. And, you know, that was the journey going forward.
In 2006, you went through, well, horrendous trauma. You were involved in a really serious accident. And I guess that's going to be the basis for what we hear your story from today, and how God's met you through that as well. Can you just tell us about that event and then what followed as well?
Okay, so the year 2006, I had just finished my first degree. I finished my first degree in 2005. And in Nigeria, we have this thing called National Youth Service.
Yeah.
So I remember when they posted me. Now, when the list was going to come out, you know, I thought, oh, they're going to post me somewhere nearby. But they ended up posting me to a place called Sokoto. Now, the last time I heard about Sokoto was in primary school, where we did the exercise called States and Capitals, right? And so it was not even in my purview that, you know, that was a place that I could be sent to. It was like literally 18 hours by road and an hour and a half by flight. Now, for context's sake, my mom's younger sister, 6 years before, had died in a plane crash. So she went on a missionary trip to Madagascar for her church, Deeper Life, at the time. And the Kenyan Airways flight that she was on crashed into the sea. And they said then that we were fortunate to find her body to bury. Now, but what that accident did was that it had an impact on my mom and the way that she viewed travel. So shortly after that, she stopped traveling internationally and even locally. So now, fast forward 6 years, you know, ahead, where I'm being posted to Sokoto, I'm not going to be on the road for 18 hours. So the most logical way is to go by air. So she's like, oh, you're not going to go, you know, for NYC, for youth service. I'm like, well, if I don't go, I wait for 6 months and they post me to the exact same place, right? So she put me on her laps and she says, Lord, this is my firstborn. Take her and bring her back to me safely at the end of the service year. Now, in Sokoto, there were flights 3 times a week, right? So the flights were on Wednesdays, Fridays, and Sundays. So most times I would be flying on a Wednesday. So my mom at the time, every time I had to fly, she would stop eating maybe on Sunday and she wouldn't break her fast, or on Monday she wouldn't break her fast until Wednesday when she knew I had landed safely in Sokoto. So it was a very traumatic experience, even just, having to put her through the fasting. Yeah. Now, I did that for 9 months and I was 21 at the time. So, you're 21, you're an adult in your mind. In African parlance, you're never really an adult. But in my mind, I'm an adult. There are people who are traveling, they do it all the time. They don't have to tell their parents. Because I remember there are sometimes I want to come home. My mom is like, is it important? Is it urgent? Then you just stay where you are. So I had an opportunity to go to Abuja to be with one of our people who had served with us, but she just did the camp part of it. She didn't do the full year. So I said I would go and see her. But this was going to be the first time I was going to travel without telling my mom. Oh. Yeah. There's just a little bit of a diversion. There's some of us, that when we want to color out of the line, that's the day that, some people may be, you're in high school, some people may be jumping the fence to go play hooky. The day you try it is the day that the principal catches you. I think I'm one of those children. So this day, we're traveling to go meet our friend in Abuja from Sokoto. And I remember that the flight was full because the Sultan of Sokoto and his entourage. Now, the Sultan of Sokoto is the Muslim leader of not just even Nigeria, but I think even West Africa. So it's a big deal, So the Sultan of Sokoto he's also the leader of, Sokoto and all that. So he was traveling with his entourage. Yeah. Now, so the plane was full, from business class to like the beginning of the plane. Anyway, so I sat in the middle. Now, I used to like to sit in the front of the plane because I used to say then that patience was not one of my virtues, right? So we went to Abuja. It was a good time. We had a good weekend. And then on Sunday morning, I woke up. I woke up at 5 a.m.-ish to have my quiet time. And I remember reading James 4:13-17 that says, paraphrasing, who are you to say today I would do this, tomorrow I would do that life is like a vapor. Now, when you have a trip, you just pray, oh Lord, have mercy, protect me. You don't really think that anything is going to happen, right? So I got to the airport. I'd never been to Abuja before that day, so I didn't know what was what. And I have to realize that I'm talking to a different context because in Nigeria, they would understand what I'm saying. Here in the airports, you have gates, you have, directions. In Nigeria, you don't have those things, right? And definitely you didn't have those things 18 years ago. So I'm there and, I'm 21 in my, era. And I'm like, oh, I'm not going to ask for directions. So, and the good thing about Sokoto the thing about Sokoto was I served in the airport for my NYSC, right? Yeah. And so Sokoto at the time did not have a middle class. So you're either very rich or very poor. So it's the same people that travel over and over again. So I recognized people that had been through the airport. So I'm like, these people are going in the same direction as I'm going. So when they get up to go, I will go with them. And so when they called for our flight was delayed. When we called for our flight, this is the morning of Sunday, called for our flight. And I got out of the gate to board the plane. And it's really hot, northern heat, and then it starts to rain. And it's that heavy rain that comes after the sun has been, so hot, right? And I remember thinking to myself, can the pilot fly in this weather? Right. But then I also thought to myself, they don't cancel flights every time that it rains. So we got on the plane. Once again, the Sultan of Sokoto is going back to his base now. So the plane is full, and I had to sit in the middle. And I was already feeling some kind of way to be in the middle of, the plane. And so I'm looking for my seat. And then I hear somebody call my full name at the time, Esther Kema Amodan. I'm like, who knows me? And it was somebody else who was also serving, but she was at the back of the plane. And she served with the airline, so she was with the crew. So she was right at the back. Now, for somebody who doesn't like to sit in the middle, is upset that she should be sitting in the front, the next thing that happened was very odd. I heard a voice in my head, which I now know is the voice of the Holy Spirit, saying, Esther, be nice to everybody because you never know when you will need them. And so that led me to sit beside her, right at the back of the plane. Now, the plane takes off, and I remember my Bible reading, so I just say an extra prayer, Father, let us take off and land safely. And we take off and we're gaining altitude. We're gaining altitude, and about 15, 30 minutes into the flight, the plane drops. Now, we just think it's bad turbulence, right? And so everybody is still okay. And then it drops again. This time you feel it in the pit of your stomach, like one of these rides. So a plane drops and I feel it in our stomach. By this time, people are screaming, children are crying, but we still think it's bad turbulence. So it drops again. Now, this is in the morning, but all the emergency lights now come on the plane. Muslims are crying Allah, Christians are crying Jesus. Wow. And, you still don't know that the plane is about to crash, right? So I looked out of the window and I used to call it a bow, but somebody recently, because I feel like bow just gives it the weight, but someone said, you heard a big bang. So I heard a big bang and I look back and I'm sitting the way that I'm sitting in the plane, but in front of me is grass. Now, people ask me, did I black out? But I say no. Before that day, I believed in God. That day, I believed in the ministry of angels, and I'll tell you why. The same way I'm sitting here strapped, my Motorola Razr, the clip here, the phone here, my bag under my seat, but in front of me was grass. Now, with the benefit of hindsight, I see that a tree, and you'll see pictures of the crash, a tree broke the fall, but even the girl that was sitting beside me, the impact of the crash flung her somewhere else. So literally, I say it was angels that dropped me, literally in the same way that I was in the air. Now you're in a plane. The plane travels fast. I had no idea where I was. I did not know how far the pilot had managed to travel, so I had no idea where we were. So I came out of the wreckage. I heard the girl that was sitting beside me crying for help, somebody help me. So I unhooked her and we started to find our way out of the wreckage. Now, we came out and we're in a field. It's still raining, there's a field, and we didn't know where we were. So there was this Hausa girl, because obviously the north of Nigeria is Hausa. So this Hausa girl, and she was crying, her brother. And I was like, oh, don't worry, your brother is fine. Because in the north, they have a tradition where the men sit in front and the women sit at the back. So I thought that the plane had broken in half and, some people were on one side and we were on another side. So I said, oh, you'll be fine. Your brother is fine or whatever. But that wasn't true. So I looked around and I saw that there were 3 girls strapped on top of each other and the one on top was pinning the 2 beneath. And, that was not a pretty sight, but pulled them off. And there was a guy that was sitting spread-eagled and he was just looking. And I remember thinking to myself, dude, like we're all in shock here, like help. But later I found out he couldn't help because his legs were broken. Now, in the middle of all of this, some villagers came, right? And they ran. So apparently we didn't realize that what had happened was the pilot was circling around the airport dumping fuel. And so the plane had actually crashed outside of the airport, but the people in the airport did not know that the plane had crashed in the village outside. So the villagers ran into the airport to get a pickup truck. And the pickup truck was to pick, the 3 of us that could stand. So that's me, the person sitting beside me who had a dislocated hip, and the other girl who had a broken hand. And I was crying for her brother. So they put us in that pickup truck. Now, that was probably the most traumatic part because you are in a muddy field, you're being jolted, jarred. So by the time I got to the airport hospital where they were bringing in the bodies and all of that stuff, I just had the irrational desire to be as far away from the airport as possible. So I called my friends who had dropped me literally, just an hour or so before that. This is what has happened. Please, can you come and pick me? So they came to pick me, took me to a private hospital where they put me on a morphine drip because I had a headache and I was there under observation. Now, an interesting thing was now happening. So I'd gone to Abuja with my flatmate. And the way the flights used to work was that the plane that would drop us in Sokoto is the same plane that would come back to Abuja to take you back to Lagos. So she was waiting for the plane to drop us in Sokoto, come back to Abuja and take her to Lagos. But that didn't happen. So obviously her parents knew that she was now stuck in Abuja and they wanted to go say hello to my mom to greet her for her daughter surviving a plane crash. How do you greet somebody who has no clue that her daughter was on the plane? In fact, my mom had called me at 3:00 to say, oh, wow, the airport in Sokoto must be crazy. I heard a plane that was coming to Sokoto crashed. I said, yes, it's crazy. Right? So in the evening, these people want to go greet my mom. And I'm like, you can't greet her because she doesn't know. So I have to tell her. Also, they told me I had to leave the private hospital and go to the general hospital where they were keeping the, the survivors or, whatever, because if not, they would just think that I had died and they didn't find my body. So I remember calling my mom to say, Mom, I have to tell you something, that plane that crashed, I was on the plane. And she was like, she gave the phone to my brother. I don't know what your sister is saying. And she said she looked in the mirror and she asked God, why me? And God said to her, my grace is sufficient for you and my strength is made perfect in your weakness. And that was the word that she held on to throughout that process. So I went to the general hospital and they kept me there for 3 days to make sure that I had no internal injuries, which I did not. The next morning I wake up and CNN is carrying the story about 4 a.m. And then I see and I start to weep because I realized that what I thought was a plane broken in half, what had happened was it was only the tail part of the plane that survived. So of the 105 people on the plane, only 9 survived. Wow. And of the 9 that survived, only 1 had no injuries, and that was me, to the glory of God. So I remember crying, when I saw it, and, a nurse, Nigerian nurse says, why are you crying? You should be grateful. I'm like, I'm crying because I'm grateful, and so I was there for 3 days. Now, it's an interesting one because I'm in Abuja. Abuja is like a halfway mark. It's 9 hours by road to Sokoto, it's 9 hours by road to Lagos. My mom says, are you crazy? You're coming back home to Lagos. First thing sorted. The next thing was, my friend called me and he worked with Virgin Nigeria at the time and he said, Esther, God didn't save you on Sunday to kill you on Wednesday. You're going to come back home by air. Yeah. Now, at that point in time, I was so excited to be coming home. So I wasn't thinking about the mode of transportation.
Yeah.
And so I was excited to be leaving the hospital, because I was the one that was the most lucid. The president came, ministers, everybody's asking you, okay, what happened? And, there's so many interviews of myself out there that I don't even know that I had because, Anyway, so it's Wednesday and it's time for me to go back home. So the airport manager comes, we're walking on the tarmac, and I see the plane and I begin to weep. I'm crying. I get on the plane. The airport manager, he introduces me to the pilots. They're like, do you want to sit in the cockpit with us? I'm like, do I look like I'm mad? I'm going to be at the back of the plane. You just drive us or, take us safely, to Lagos. So I remember sitting at the back of the plane with my flatmate and a random guy that till today I still don't know who it was. But I was sitting and I held their hand so tightly, weeping throughout the 40-minute flight. And at the end of the flight, the pilots say, oh, we want to dedicate this flight to Esther, one of the survivors of, the ADC plane crash. And they were like, oh, so they were now clapping. They're like, oh, no wonder, because they thought I was like this village girl who had never been on a plane before. That's why I was crying. So I got out of the plane, people are trying to take pictures, doing all kinds of things. And I got home and a camera crew was in our house. I don't know who had called the camera crew, but my mom put me back on her lap and said, Father, I thank you for bringing my daughter back to me safe. Now, because it was a very unusual thing to happen, our house was inundated with visitors, and Nigerians are not known for subtlety, right? So they're like, second Jesus, ask the Lord for your purpose. And I was just like, God, I was just like, and then to hear, the caliber of people who had lost their lives in the plane crash. I know one of my friends, one of my classmates, her dad was in the plane crash, a woman and her 4 children died. Deacons in my church growing up died. The Sultan of Sokoto, his son and his grandson died in that plane. I was like, God, the headlines, miracle girl, all kinds of things. I'm like, God, what do you want from me? What do you want? Do you want my firstborn? Like what do you want?
Yeah.
So a few days later, I went into, I started having panic attacks. And I didn't realize that I also went into what they call survivor's guilt. But I was now depressed for about 2 years. you know. So usually, when I share the testimony, a lot of times I end, you know, in the part where my mom puts me on her lap and says, you know, thank God. But a lot of what people don't realize is that, you know, there was survivor's guilt. Like, what is it about this pipsqueak of a girl, you know, that warrant you, Lord, saving her in such a spectacular fashion and putting her on a pedestal for everybody to be like, you know, this is the work of God. So it felt like too much for me. So like for the next 2 years, I was in survivor's guilt.
I wanted to ask even just, wow, like I've never heard anything like that before in my life. I was just thinking so many images were flashing through my mind as you were speaking. People use the word miracle a lot, but it's like one of those unnatural experiences. And I'm just trying to take it back to the fact that you got back on a plane after you survived a plane crash. I don't even have the words. When you walked into your house, I'm just wondering, when was the moment when you realized I just survived a plane crash? When did your emotions come back to you? When did you come back to yourself, I think, is just my first question. When did you come back to yourself and feel like you were present in your own body? You knew where you were?
That's such a beautiful question. I don't think anybody ever asked me that question before.
Okay.
Yeah. So the time that I felt like, oh, I've survived a plane crash was the morning after.
Okay.
That 4 a.m. when I'm seeing it on TV and I'm like, oh my God, this was literally the part of the plane that survived. And you have to see, there's only a small part. It's literally the tail end that has ADC on it. If you Google, you will see it. And when the ADC people came to the house, that's the plane people, you know, to commiserate or condolence, whatever it was they called it, they said how the rest of the plane was in pieces and they were literally walking through body parts. So I think that the morning after was the only time I was alone with my thoughts.
Okay. Yeah.
Because subsequently, you know, with politics, you know, and it being such a high-profile event, there was a deluge of public officials coming in to ask different questions, to take pictures. In fact, I remember one of the top officials at the time, he just literally came in. They said, where are the survivors? Here, stood, took a picture, and he left. Yeah. So, yeah. But, you know, he was an extreme, right? But other people, you know, they'll ask questions and they don't come alone, right? So they're coming with an entourage. So the president comes, he's not coming alone. He's coming with people, he's coming with ministers, you know, and they're also journalists and stuff. I get back home, my house is not quiet. I enter into my living room, there's a press crew, you know, and there are visitors coming in, people that know me, people that know more. People say, oh, I remember coming to your house. I'm like, who are you? I don't even know you.
So the people are in your, so you realize the next morning I'm alive. You haven't processed any emotions, right? People in your house that you've never met before.
Yeah.
When did the emotions then kick in?
And
what emotions?
it didn't even feel like I could process because people kept saying, oh, you're so lucky to be alive. God has a purpose for your life. God has a purpose for your life. And I'm like, you know, and all of that stuff. The only person who got me, interestingly enough, was my dad. Now, I didn't grow up with my dad, right? But I remember talking to my dad on the phone and I was telling him how I felt, you know, this survivor's guilt. And he was telling me how he was in a car crash and he survived. And I mean, it's not close, right? But he was the only one that understood how I was feeling.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And so I think it probably maybe even took me that 2 years. In fact, no, 2 years and then 2 years in 2008 and then 2016 before I got my full emotional healing.
Wow.
Thank you so much for tuning in today. My name's Rachel.
And my name's Sinead, and we'll be your hosts for these episodes as we're joined by incredible women from the Magnify community to chat through their lived journeys and experiences across money, relationships, and work, all from the perspective of their relationship with God.
We know so many of you already watch these conversations, so if you haven't yet subscribed to our channel, hit the button now. It really helps this important content to reach even more women around the world and ensures we keep bringing these conversations to you.
We hope you enjoy this episode. Let's get into it.
So, bar the obvious of survivor's guilt that you survived and others didn't, how did that play out? Like, what kind of thoughts and emotions did you have in those 2 years?
So, first of all, I used to call myself, I've always been in my head. I've always wanted to be private, normal. This was not normal. And so it thrust me into a notoriety that I wasn't prepared for.
Yeah.
1. 2, because I didn't die. I got to hear both sides. I got to hear, people say, oh, what would have said at my grave. It was beautiful. It's good to hear those things. But I also got to hear things like, what were you looking for on that? And I was like, Auntie, we're going to say this to my mom, So I got to hear both sides. Now, there's a funny place that you're in when you survive something that other people don't.
Yeah.
Because it is almost as if you have to be in this place of gratitude, which you are. But then you're like, what?
Yeah. What next or
What happened?
Yeah.
Why did it happen?
Yeah.
And what is it about me that is singled out? So I don't know if a lot of people are in that space. It's a very weird space, and you almost don't feel like you can have any questions because you're supposed to be, I just bless God for my life. Oh Lord, I'm going to give my life to you forever. Where's the next missionary? Wow, I'm going to take a backpack and go around Africa and preach the gospel. And I'm like, no. And I remember saying to people at the time, I don't want to be known as the plane crash girl. Now, it sounds stupid. Do you know what I mean? Actually, I want to be known for doing something for myself, like winning a Nobel Prize. I don't want to be known as something that I had nothing to do, for something that I had nothing to do with. And so over the next couple of years, I came to the UK, I had my first master's, I worked, I got my second master's, got my PhD, just to be this person, that is known for something in her own right.
Yeah.
And I'm pursuing this thing until 2008. 2008, yes, I'm in my church in Cardiff at the time, All Nations, beautiful church. And before then, in this survivor's guilt phase, the interesting thing about depression is that you can be the funniest person in the room. And I was a clown. I used to crack people up. People, and I'll be looking at them, I'm like a third person. Why are you laughing? What's funny? I'm literally like, do you know what I mean? Like, you're interacting, but you're like, so you're laughing. What? Like, what is funny? And I remember in maybe the beginning of 2008, a girl that I'd gone to, high school with, she killed herself. And people were like, how can she kill her? Then it's not like now when people, how can she kill herself? Hey, does she not have things to live for? And I was like, I can understand.
Right.
I can understand how you can be so depressed. My mother had poured too much anointing on my head for me to ever think about it. You know what I mean? But I can understand. So it wasn't until November 2008, and I'm in my church, and I think it's worship. But I remember the Lord saying to me, He's like, Esther, if you can accept the gift of salvation, which is a second chance, eternal life, then you can accept this gift of a second chance at life with this life that has all its trials and tribulations. And I was like, it's such a simple statement, but it was so profound because it cut through the darkness in my mind. And I was like, okay, Lord, if the only thing I can do is just share this testimony, I will do that. I don't know what you saved me for. I don't know why you saved me, but at least I can start with sharing the testimony. And so even then, I only shared it once a year on the anniversary, but my vow was in a new place because if I don't tell you, you won't know that I survived a plane crash. So that was my vow to God until He hijacked my life.
You said something, the darkness in my mind.
Yeah.
In this modern, 2024, where everyone is talking about mental health, everyone is talking about more vocalizing their experiences. There's more language for maybe what you went through. There's more terms now. But at the time, how did you articulate to people? Did you have therapy? Did you speak to anyone about this experience? And as you're shaking your head, I'm thinking, so were you praying about it? were you vocalizing it in any way at all?
I think that the answer is no. The short answer is no. And I didn't necessarily feel like I had a safe space to share, which is why I'm very passionate right now, and informs a lot of the work that I do about creating safe spaces for high-achieving women, especially, to unburden.
Yeah.
Because I didn't feel, I had great friends at the time, but I didn't feel like I could. You know, it wasn't just something that you spoke about. It was like life was lifing. People are going through stuff. You know, how you talk about something that happened, 2 years before or anything like, you know what I mean? Like, you almost feel like, move on, you didn't die, like you're awake. Wow. You know, so, and I realized that type A personalities, we're very hard on ourselves, aren't we? Almost like, why are you, like, get on up, you know what I mean? Like, just move on. And I was studying for a master's, I was working, like life, it wasn't really the front burner. I know we have a way of pushing things back and just going until one day you can't, and life makes you stop. And obviously, being African, we don't really believe in therapy, even though now, thankfully, we have Jesus and therapy because you need both, but then it wasn't even a concept. So I think that if I look at my journey, it was the Holy Spirit that really helped me. And he helped me with honest conversations. So 2008, yes, that was the light, breaking forth and, the depression lifted. 2014, I'm now in Bath studying for my PhD, and I remember going to church, and this is one of this. So when the people hear that I'm in ministry now, or I'm a coach, and I'm doing all those things, they think it's because of the plane crash. But it's actually this experience that happened to me in, I think, August 2014 that was the game changer. And it was I lived in Bath at the time. I used to go to a Church of England church. Now, Church of England church is not a place that, shout out to, Church of England, but it's not a place where you're expecting to have a deep spiritual encounter.
Okay, yeah.
And not in Bath, right? Okay. So, this context. Now, my church in Bath was mostly Caucasian. So, the only two black ladies. And the other one was not in church. And I say this because I would have thought maybe it was her that they meant. But there was this couple that had just come back from Bethel Supernatural School of Ministry in California, Redding, California. And they had just welcomed them back to church. After the service, the wife just comes for me, like, pew. She says, the Lord says to tell you that he loves your heart. Meanwhile, what she did not know is in that moment, me and God were having this fight. Are you serious? God, if you're so good, because I was abused at age 4. Why was I abused at age 4? Why are my parents not together? Why was I in a plane crash? So me and God were not really speaking. Right. So for this lady to come and say, God says he loves your heart. She says other things about creativity. To tell you, the most important thing to me was God loves my heart. I was like, okay. I could not wait for the service to be over. I ran into my room, locked the door, and I said, today, Lord, is today. We're going to speak. If you're so good, then why? And I listed everything. And then the Lord showed me Exodus 19, verse 4. I led you out of Egypt on eagle's wings. And God said to me, the things that you have been through were literally and figuratively supposed to have killed you. I'm the one that has protected you to this moment where you can surrender. And that was the day, even though I had given my life to God at age 5, rededicated at age, 2003, whatever the age that was, that was the day that I entered into intimacy with God. Because before then, my life was like a yo-yo, my walk with God. When you're high one day, the next day you're like, do you really love me? Do you really care? But that was the day that I entered into intimacy with God. And then I started asking God. And because I was able to have that conversation with God, I feel like that was when my lens of life shifted. Then 2016. So they say healing is progressive. And I think that people who are going through their healing journey need to give themselves time.
Yeah.
Because that is something that I don't think that we talk enough about. Because I don't understand it. People are going through pain and it's almost like you give them a clock.
I want to pick up on that.
Yeah.
I want to pick up on that because you said I entered into intimacy with God. And we say this a lot, intimacy, but it's really knowledge of a person.
Yeah.
And then you said I had a conversation with God. So now you're actually building a relationship.
Yeah.
Do you feel like your relationship with God from that point onwards was the space to heal?
Yeah.
And on top of that, do you feel that like how you said we give people a clock. Is it only our relationship with God where he gives us the room, but you didn't have any other room for anyone else to give you that time to heal? It was like was that relationship where you felt you could get...
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. And I think that there's a gap.
Okay.
There's a gap, especially for people who are Christians.
Yeah.
Because the church is supposed to be a place where you can have those why questions asked.
This is good. Yeah, this is good. Yeah.
I don't know what churches you guys grew up, but if you start asking why questions, oh, Sister Esther is backsliding, I knew it. I'm actually asking all these questions.
Right, yeah.
And I know, because of the work that I even do, I know so many leaders in church who have why questions for God. Lord, I serve you, I love you, why am I waiting for children? Why did my person die? There's so many questions. But you feel like you can't articulate those questions because people are going to look at you sideways. Do you still, should we put a suicide word? Should we call a fast or prayer? But everybody has those questions. And I always say this, Jeremiah 15, from verse 15 to the end, Jeremiah was a prophet. His job, not just a prophet to the nations. His job was to hear God for the people. And he says in Jeremiah 15, he says, Lord, your words came and I ate them like honey. I did not party when they were partying. I'm paraphrasing. I didn't do all of those things. But he said, have you been to me like a deceitful brook or like waters that fail? Now, I don't know, does deceit mean the same thing that it does in your dictionary? I'm like, did you call God a liar? Did you call my Jesus a liar? But he's like, it's not adding up. I'm living this life for you. I'm doing all these things, but I didn't call you a deceitful brook. I said, are you like a deceitful brook or like waters that fail? And the Lord asked me, he said, look at my response. Did I open up the ground and let, him fall into? No. Did I call thunder to strike him? No. I had a conversation and I said to him, and this is what the Lord says. He says, if you return to me, then I will return to you. I will make you, I'll put you in a place of quietness and safety. I will make you a fortified bronze wall. And the Lord was saying that the longer you walk with him, your alignment is not going out to a club, you're not going out clubbing, it's literally, Lord, are you still good? Do you still love me? And you don't even realize that, you're just out. And he says, if you will come back to me, then I'll come back to you. And the thing that you're looking for, which is a place of quietness and safety, knowing that you're right in the center of God's will, I will give it to you. I will cause, and he says, they will come at you, but they will not succeed. So everything that you're afraid of, if you come back into alignment, you'll find that it's there in me.
So it's almost when we're asking God why, it's because we are already diverting from even the possibility that he is good, that he loves us. Yeah. We already started to make up our minds about those questions. Yeah. And in your relationship with God, you've learned, which I think I've not even begun to learn that, but that you've had that confrontation where he's told you, if you come to me, then you will start to receive that exchange of understanding how I protect you, what I have planned for you, what is good for you. Yeah. But a lot of us, when bad things happen, we run.
Run from him.
Run from him.
Yes.
We run from him. Yeah. And I think that is almost the formula. Christian, non-Christian, people go completely away from the one person that can answer our question.
Do you know who's laughing in that? The enemy. Do you know why? Because he's the one that inflicted the bad thing.
Yes.
So he's winning twice because he does the evil, and then he now makes you, instead of running to the one that can save you and help you or give you the next keys for what is happening next, he makes you run away from him. But for the people that God calls friend, if you look at even David, look at his Psalms to the tune of Michael Jackson's Human Nature. Why, oh why have you forsaken me, Lord, right? But by the time he finishes the Psalm, he's like, I will yet trust in you. I will yet hope. So God, we say this, you can't question God. And yes, you can't question his character, but you can ask him questions. That is the basis of intimacy and friendship. Lord, I don't understand. Why did this happen? And by the time you finish the conversation, just like with Jeremiah, just like with David, who the Lord says was a man after his own heart, you come to that place where you're like, you're good. You're good. And this is where I tabernacle. There's me and you against the world.
Was there a time where you felt like you could put those why questions to bed, or did they ever come back?
They could, the different why questions come per season.
Different ones, yeah. But in relation to that experience that you went through? Because it seems like you got some, clarity is the wrong word, but it seems like you got some breakthrough from the thing of like, why me? But there's so much more than just why me. There's why everybody else. Why did it have to happen? Do you feel those questions come back every so often? And if they do, how do you deal with that?
So the two things. So in 2016, I was in a Christian gathering, and I remember, and I'm not a shouter, but I remember it was praise and worship, and I just remember that's when I got my emotional healing. I remember shouting, Lord, you're good, because God showed me that even if I was the only one on the plane, because before I used to think that the Lord saved me for my mother, for my purpose, for my future husband and children, but he was like, I saved you for you. Wow. Okay. And that's 10 years after.
Yeah.
Now, in 2020, is it 1 or 2? 2021, my plane crash video went viral in Nigeria. And I had people reaching out to me. And, they were like, oh, it's so good to hear an account. My parents were on that flight. My siblings were on that flight. And it's good to even have an idea as to their, the last moments of their lives. And I was like, Jesus, what do you do with this? What do you do? What do you do with this? What do you do with this? Because this is, like, you survived. They lost family. Their lives were changed on that day. And honestly, I'm not going to pretend like I have answers, because I do not. I remember one of my friends who was, agnostic at the time saying, okay, if God saved you, then why didn't he save the rest? And I was like, I don't know. The Lord uses the foolish things of this world to confound the wisdom of the wise. So I still don't know. I guess those questions will be answered in eternity.
Yeah. When you think about, because it's been a long journey, and actually, I wish I've had a better word, because it's been a helpful journey of healing.
Right.
And I love how you can mark the stages of healing in your life, not just from this situation, but from other moments in your life. But have there been any other healthy habits that have come now because of this journey of healing that you recognize or you practice? You mentioned even with women creating a space for them. What other healthy habits have come out of you learning about healing in a way that most of us will never really, be able to understand?
I think there are two things I'd probably like to note. The first one is vulnerability.
Okay.
We don't really like the V word, right? But I think that one of the ways to be authentic, to heal, is to actually be able to say it as it is. However, I found that with a lot of women, the higher your profile, the less vulnerable you think that you can be, because you feel like you're in a dog-eat-dog world or whatever. But I think that actively creating those spaces. Okay. So because I find that even those who want to be able to be vulnerable must also create those spaces of vulnerability around themselves. Okay. So that's something that I not just practice, but teach people, like, allow people to be vulnerable with you. Yeah. So, sometimes women, somebody's pouring out their heart and like, yeah, but you should have seen my last week. That's not a safe space.
Right.
Right? Or is that it? No, you can't, and that's the fastest way to shut down that person, if not for life. It's God that's gonna, So it's just creating spaces to realize that it doesn't even seem like trauma to you, does not mean it's not trauma to the person, because the mind is such a powerful thing. So even, when you're talking about, the recency effect of, how everybody's saying, my mental health space, I mean, yes, it has been flogged, but honestly, if your mind shuts you down, you can be the most accomplished, the most powerful person, and you will not see it.
Yeah.
So you need to be able to say, this is how I'm feeling. And so if you don't have a coach, get a coach. If you don't have a therapist, get a therapist. If you don't have a church, just get those circles where you can be.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Esther. I mean, I think myself and Sinead are still just processing what you said, but the many women who are part of our community and just people who will listen to this story, who are really trying to process or just think about how to process with a real genuine trauma in their lives. What kind of wisdom from your experience can you offer in the midst of that?
As you're speaking, there's something I say, time doesn't heal all wounds, intentionality does. You have to be intentional. You have to be intentional. And what that looks like is vulnerability, Speak. A lot of people don't speak. They don't speak. Have you found that you can have conversations and you're talking about everything and nothing at the same time?
Yes.
Speak. Find help. It's not weakness, and I think that, this trying to be powerful, no, just if you don't got it, I don't got it today. And it's okay not to got it, and just speak and find help. So what people don't realize, I've had 2 children. my youngest is 5 and I'm still trying to figure out my life as like, what happened to my sleep? What happened to, things take time. Yeah. But it takes time with you recognizing that, hey, I went through something. I'm not just going to get over it. I have to find the steps. So, and there's steps out there. There's help out there. So if you're postpartum recovery, there are groups. There's always help available, but we can't lie to ourselves that, whatever I went through is not traumatic enough, or, and that's the thing. It's almost like we have grades. Okay, so if I didn't survive a plane crash like Esther, then what? No, like sometimes it can be the loss of a friendship that is traumatic. And if it affects you in a certain way, then it is legitimate. And you look for the help. You don't try and toughen it up and keep going, because one day it will pile up and you will not be able to move. Yeah. And then we have those breakdowns where the person says, I'm not doing CEO anymore. CEO can go to blazes. I'm taking my backpack. I'm going to Africa to eat, pray, love. No, you don't need to get that far. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Like look for help, speak, and find circles of vulnerability where you can just express how you're feeling. But beyond that, even as much as I encourage, sister circles, therapy, and all of those things, there's someone who created you, who knows you in and out, who knows how all the pieces fit, who knows why he even allowed certain things to happen, because sometimes our greatest angst is, God, if you're so good, then why did you allow this to happen? But just like Jesus dying on the cross, it says, if the enemy had known, he would not have allowed our Jesus to die. Like, there are things that are allowed, but if the devil knew, he would not have touched you. Because what comes out of that process, when you and God get together, the devil wish he had left you and your family lineage alone for the rest of eternity. Yeah. But we don't cross over, because we're so angry with God and we can't speak. So we become like the prodigal older brother. Lo, I have served you all these years and you've not given me a goat. Yeah. And he's like, bro, you own the whole farm. Yeah. It's yours. It's yours.
Wow. So Esther, thank you so much once again, just for your vulnerability and your openness and just sharing your processing and your story with us and this community. And of course, as the Magnify community, we always love to ask, how can we support you? Where can we find you online? Is there anything that you're excited about that's coming up that you would like us to know about?
Amazing, thank you. I have a flagship coaching program called the Unicorn Program. It starts in January. I turned 40 this year in November, so I'm writing a book on my process till date. And the best way to get all that information really is to connect with me on Instagram at Esther Longe,
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Esther.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for sharing your story with us.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for today's conversation. We hope you gleaned as much from it as we did.
You can join us to cultivate wisdom, be inspired, and gain knowledge on how to put your best foot forward in your career, money, and relationships, all grounded in faith as we grow together.
If you haven't already, subscribe to our channel to keep up to date with all of our episodes at the Magnify Conversations.
If you have a story to share and would like to be featured on the conversations, get in touch with Team Magnify through magnifycollective.com and head to our contact form.
We'll see you soon for another installment. From all of our team and crew, have a great week.